we're going to be looking towards a very interesting 2023. We just recently had an election here in the United States. The Democrats kept the Senate. The Republicans won the House back. The President Biden, is still the president here, and now we're looking to see towards the future. What's very important to understand about the Gold Institute for International Strategy, for those who are unfamiliar at this point, is we're thinking do tank. We look at things, we look at foreign policy and defense or national security matters, and we look at things from how do we find practical and implementable solutions. Most important, those two components are very important in everything that we do moving forward and all of our policies. But in order to do that, we have to have representation from across the globe and from our allies. And for that reason, we have 8 countries represented within the Gold Institute. And what I've asked from our distinguished and senior fellows who are from outside the United States to join us today to have a conversation about what are they looking for, what are they in their capacity, whether it's within parliaments or advisors and so on, what are they looking for from the United States? What are they looking for from the new Congress? The new dynamics. Are they hopeful or not? So for joining us today, we have from a variety of different countries, and the way we'll begin is I'm going to go around and ask each one of our participants to take 3 minutes, 2, 3, 4 minutes, just to get a sense as to what their viewpoint is for the future. What are they optimistic, pessimistic, as well as what do they in their country that they represent? What do they want to see coming out of Washington? It's very important. We live in a society that is heavily reliant on the United States. The United States is currently the global leader and will stay hopefully the leader long into the future. Although we see China is attempting to take that role. So let's begin. Let's just jump right in. And we have with us from representing the Netherlands in the European Parliament, we have a distinguished fellow, an honorary distinguished fellow, Roos. Rob, let's start with you.
It's very important. You mentioned the United States is the world leader, and you hope that the United States will be the world leader, and I do also hope that too. I think it's very important to stay on top as our Western society, because we have democracy as a value, and we don't see that with China and other states who wants to take this over. So it's really important that that the United States stay on top. In that perspective, I think it's also very important that we defend our values. What we see with the Democrats, I see that they don't really defend our values. We see an influx of migrants, which is not per se very bad. But we also see that in the Netherlands. But we see that it's affecting our culture in a way. It's not always good. So to defend these values, we need more conservative in the government. And I had a bad day after the midterms when the first results came out. There was no red wave, what was expected, and in the end, the Democrats, they kept the Senate, the Republicans, they won the House, but it was a very small victory. And I really hope, and that's also what I told them, that they will run for the president. And we have presidential elections. Is it going to be Donald Trump? Is it going to be Ron DeSantis? And I think they should make a choice, and a choice that they absolutely win the president elections in 2024. I think it's crucial for our future. So that's something that has to be done in the Republican Party. They have to decide. And we will see what is going to happen. Another thing is we should work together as United States and European Union. Let's say Europe. What we see now is that in the United States, we in Europe, we fear the new act against the inflation. All this money is what will be spent on attracting companies to the United States. And I understand that the United States is doing that, but we should not have a competition between each other. We should reinforce each other. We should work together, and we should make we should reinforce each other and make good agreements on how we going to stay on top as a Western society, and not letting China come away with that. So that is how I look at the situation. So I hope more conservative values, because that's important for our Western values, and that's only going. Yeah, we only gonna achieve that with a Republican president, and working together and not making a competition between Europe and the United States. Thank you.
Thank you. And we're going to come back and maybe pose some questions, and then of course everybody will hopefully have time for a conversation. Geoffrey, let's move to the UK. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts about what Congress or what Washington will look like, and what do you see that the UK that's important to the UK coming out of to come out of Washington?
Well, in a nutshell, I want to see strong international leadership, and I want to see a self-confident and United States. That's what we need to see. I mean, I think too often in the last couple of decades, we've just assumed that our sort of model of liberal free market democracies, where our rules and our ordering of society was somehow most desirable. And I think we've neglected the fact that in many parts of the world, people don't necessarily share that view. I'm not talking about our deep enemies. I'm talking about countries who are basically on side, but they don't necessarily accept the whole package in which we represent it. And of course, we've seen poor economic performance, and we've seen a lot of disruption in our own societies, and none of that is a model or an example that others want to emulate. So I think there are just three little headings I'd want to touch on. One is supporting key allies. The second is understanding and developing new allies. And the third, and in a way this underpins everything else, rekindling self-belief. Now, if we take the first point, this idea, and it's been brought home to us over this World Cup and Qatar, I think on the left, they don't see that this sort of idea of going around the world trying to impose our moral values on everyone else is just the latest form of imperialism. Yeah. Don't forget, we are dealing with a lot of, long-standing other cultures and civilizations in some cases, which have got on perfectly well without being lectured to by the West. And I think this is something we have to be very careful about. I mean, previously we could assume that countries like Saudi Arabia and Qatar were just firm allies. Now, the strands are a little bit looser, and we've got to be very careful that we don't see them floating in the wrong sort of direction. And I have to say, we can't allow the ambitions of one or two allies to disrupt relationships with other key allies. And obviously there, I'm talking about the French attitude in particular to Britain over the fact that we left, we had the temerity to leave the European Union. But the United States doesn't quite understand this at the moment. And it's, I'm not terribly hopeful that they will understand it, certainly under the present regime. And of course, I come back to my long-standing view about Turkey. Now quite a long-standing ally, and one that we haven't handled well over the last few decades. But we've talked about this before. So that's the first thing: supporting key allies and understanding them, and then understanding and developing new allies. Now, a couple of points here. I've been talking about this for a while, and I'm delighted that 3 days ago, the British Foreign Secretary made a sort of keynote speech in London, where he was picking up on precisely this point, that we have our established alliances, we have our established allies, but the world's even bigger than that, and there are a lot of key countries that we now need to win over, and, if you like, make sure that they're part of our club, so to speak, in the best senses of that word. I think of these emerging powers like Indonesia, South Africa, Ethiopia, Nigeria, Egypt, some of the Latin American countries. These are very important countries which others have their eye on. And I think they're about China and Russia. And we need to get these people firmly into the Western camp. And then my other point was just about rekindling self-belief. Now, no one's going to want to follow our example if we don't believe in it ourselves. Once upon a time, we were all very firm in what we believed in. We were very proud of our history. We had a clear set of moral values. We knew what worked. And this was the basis. And people, all the things, in my own country, all the things we want to sort of pull down and change are the very things which other people most admire us for. This is the extraordinary sort of paradox, if you like. So we need to rekindle self-belief. We've got to the state of affairs now where it seems almost to be popularly accepted in our societies that our history is a sort of one sort of unbroken tale of violence and exploitation, and that just about everything we ever did was wrong and done for the wrong reasons. And now, even science, literature, medicine, music, even sport, these are being seen as sort of instruments of Western oppression. Slavery, of course, has been much in the news. An abhorrent idea and institution, but it's been firmly put in people's minds in our countries that this is a sort of uniquely Western colonial sort of device, conveniently ignoring that it's precisely in those parts of Asia and Africa where slavery really began and was deeply rooted, and where it persists today. So we need to fight back against all this. And of course, we have to recognize what we've done in the world, and we need to trumpet our achievements. I mean, 50 years ago, there were billions of people across the world that were mired in poverty and oppression. Half of humanity lived in what we calculated as absolute poverty. Today, that figure is 10%. I mean, this is a massive achievement, and we've done it. It's the West that's done it. So, we need to be proud of our achievements, and we have to get other people to recognize that that's what we've done and be grateful for it. We've got to get on the front foot again. We've got to make the case for freedom. I mean, it's freedom, for goodness sake, that underpins our societies, and we live in now less free societies than we did when I was a young man. So we've got to trumpet our values, trumpet our successes. And I have to say also, by the way, that internally in each of our countries, where we have a party in power that some might be opposed to, I think they've got to recognize successes. I mean, if you take, for example, Biden, I mean, at this moment, as I understand it, I mean, you've got this US-Africa leadership conference going on. I mean, this is a good thing. People should be praising this from right across the political spectrum. I think it's a sign of maturity when your political opponents can actually say, oh, yeah, well done. This is exactly the sort of thing that needs to be happening. We support it. And I think our citizens and voters will recognize that as a sign of political maturity. So I think we've got to be willing to do that. And I think also the United States has to listen to its allies as well. It has done at various stages in the past. At other times, it's chosen not to. Normally, it's got itself into trouble when it doesn't. So listen to your allies. You don't necessarily have to go along with them, but at least listen to what they've got to say. So I'm actually an optimist.
Good.
I believe in the human spirit. I believe in these great achievements that we've had. I think we have wonderful societies. Most of the world still lives in a pretty poor state, and people want to come to our societies. And why do they want to come? Well, opportunities, freedom, all of those things. And instead, in our societies, we've allowed to breed the very people they're trying to escape from. So we have to protect our democracies as well. So
you make some excellent points on that. As we are currently struggling with the security of our southern border. So you clearly make some good points on that. And so thank you, Geoffrey Van Orden, one of our distinguished fellows from the United Kingdom. But let's jump a little bit away, and we'll go to Kurdistan region of Iraq. Nahro Zagros, a senior fellow of ours. Nahro, floor is yours.
Good evening. Things are a bit calmer here at the moment, and people are hooked up to TVs watching World Cup, and lots of drama with that, and lots of corruption. In fact, the European Union has been entangled with a few problems lately, as of yesterday and the day before. But anyway, politically, we have a new government in Iraq 1 year after the election. There is a new government in Iraq, and the situation hasn't improved much. It's like I said earlier, it's one step forward, 2 steps backward. It's been like that. It's been going this way for quite some years now. What's striking and what's important to notice here is that American allies in Iraq are losing hope. I mean, they don't necessarily find good friends around. Plus, they are becoming weaker and weaker. Iranian allies, on the other hand, are becoming stronger, more coherent, and more powerful. The Iraqi government is in the hands of Iranians. American allies, like ourselves, we are getting less help from the United States, but also from the European Union. I guess one of the reasons is that of this war with Ukraine and Russia. It has affected life here. It has affected life in Europe and beyond. And I think it's the same here. But right now, with all these problems, that's how we see America. From our end, this is what we see. This is how we see America. Is that there is too much infight in America, and there is no leadership. To put it this way, I think the conservatives have problems among their ranks, as well as Democrats are quite weak at the moment. So we don't know how America is going to deal with this region and how America is going to deal with Iraq. Regardless of who is in power in Washington, without American leadership, the Middle East will fall apart. And sometimes in the media, especially the press in Europe and in America, especially the left-wing press, the problems that Middle East is facing is put down to America as if it's America's fault. It's incorrect. Still, without America, this place will fall apart. Without American leadership, this place will fall apart. But the trouble is, we don't see any leadership. And with all the problems going on around the world, it reminds us of the Second World War. Plus, this time it's more dangerous because there is no leaders. During the Second World War, we had Churchill, we had Roosevelt, we had leadership, but now it seems there is no leadership. This is Iraq today, and it's very much in the hands of Iranians. The other thing that is affecting life here in the Middle East is the revolution in Iran. For over 2 months, we had people coming on streets and sacrificing their lives for freedom, and the world is not helping them. The world are not listening to them. This is a revolution led by women in Iran, and if they succeed, they will change the Middle East for better and for good. And I think the West needs to find a way to support the Iranian people. Look at the football match between Iran and the United States. When the US won the war, the football game, all Iranians inside Iran were celebrating, because it shows how people are waiting for support from the West. Iranians were happy that their football team lost to America. If you have seen footages on social media, on Twitter, I've posted a few things on this, on our platform, on our WhatsApp platform, how Iranians were celebrating that their football team lost to America. So I think we should recognize that. We should be more, show leadership and support the Iranian people to topple their despotic government. Turkey, on the other hand, it's more in turmoil than ever. Their economy is crushed to the ground. Turkish lira is decimated and destroyed. To give you an example, like 7 years ago, I was going to Istanbul, changing $100 for 200, 300 liras. Now $100 is worth 1,860 liras. So many Turks are leaving the country. They seek employment elsewhere. And plus, today the court in Turkey imprisoned Imamoglu, which is the mayor of the largest city, Istanbul. And it's a symbolical gesture coming from the government, taking somebody who is very strong, that is going to stand against Erdogan in the presidential elections next year, and is put in prison for 2 years and 6 months. This is going to show a bad image of Turkey to the world, I think, and also that Turkish democracy is more in turmoil now than ever. These are things from this end, from the Middle East and from Turkey, from Iran. On the good note, to end on the good note, today our Prime Minister, the Kurdistan Regional Prime Minister, hanged a photo of a U.S. congressman, senator, at our airport, Jim Inhofe, senator of Oklahoma, I believe, a conservative one, for his support for the Kurdistan region over the past 30, 40 years, and which is, it was his recognition of his good work for the Kurdistan region. And I think this is a good sign. So we are very much, regardless who is in power in Washington, in the Kurdistan region, we still look towards America, and we see American, the power's gone from here. So we see ourselves as important allies of the United States and the region and the West in the region. And we very much look forward to a better and stronger leadership in the United States.
Thank you, Nahro. So Hermann Tertsch is joining us now. And Hermann, what I have done is I've asked everybody to take 2 or 3 minutes to talk about, from your perspective, you represent Spain in the European Parliament. Excuse me. So you just to give a sense as to what your thoughts are on the current leadership in Washington. We now, in the future, talking about, we now have a Republican House of Representatives. Democrats keep control of the Senate. Of course, we have Democrat President Joe Biden. But what your thoughts are on the future of Washington as you're working with Washington, and what you hope to see in the new year with the new Congress. So if I can, we're going to go jump right to you, Hermann, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry of being late. I just arrived from Strasbourg in Madrid. The plane was late. Every plane is late now in Europe, more or less. So we had some snow and it was quite difficult. So anyway, I'm happy to be here with all of you. And well, first of all, in respect to the midterm, let's say it disappointingly good for Biden. No, it has been too good for Biden, and I think it has been a deep disappointment for everybody of us who thought there would be a solid correction of the situation in Washington, or the correlation of forces in Washington, and it didn't happen. No, in this sense. Biden has had a very good result, and we must say for this midterm, for an incumbent president, and we are very keen of seeing somebody else in the White House. So in this sense, I must insist that I think it's very urgent that we see some policy in the United States which gives us hope that this change will happen. I'm especially in this moment, I'm enormously worried about South America and Latin America in general. What is happening there? It's absolutely appalling, the situation. Every day we have bad news about more conquests of all this for the Sao Paulo, with all the drug cartels and the communist movement are taking over almost every place they want. And well, there's a resistance now in Peru, but who knows? And we have seen now 5 countries of the region trying to press on Peru to free the man who just committed a coup, was attempting a coup 4 days ago. I mean, some questions which would not happen without this perception of weakness and of laissez-faire, no, for the bad that we see in Washington. Yeah, well, let's see what happens with the House, how they start to move. And now, as I say, I have hopes that we have a perspective. I'm a little bit afraid about the personal fate of Trump. I think it's a great historical injustice if we want what has happened to Trump. But I think he is now in a let's say in a kind of shape that is causing far more difficulties than advantages to the idea we defend and the positions, the conservative movement in general. In this sense, with Trump endorsing DeSantis, for example, but I know it won't happen. So I can only say, well, we are expecting some changes. We think, as I say, it would be very dangerous now, a kind of infighting in the conservative movement, a kind of fierce fighting of Trump for maintaining positions that I think he would not be able to defend then in a presidential race. That's my opinion. And in this sense, I'm a little bit worried about that. Anyway, looking to see how they start to move this new situation in the House.
So let me ask you real quick, Hermann, let me just jump right into a specific question for you. Are there any specific policies or issues that you would like to see the new Congress focus on?
Well, in foreign policy, I think till now, the position on Ukraine has been right. That's been the position that I would defend. I think in the fiscal policy and in the energy policy, what they are doing is lots of harm to the American people, and I think to the solidity of the Western world. And on the other side, of course, I would love to see some movement against this ideological warfare that we are seeing in the States and which has enormous effect on Europe. The influence is absolutely enormous and terrifying. In this sense, I would like to see a solid conservative resistance to all the woke appearances in the policy, in the educational policy, and in the message. Mostly, if you want, in the cultural message that has to come from a solid political position which wants to shape from 2024, wants to shape the policy of the states again.
Okay, excellent. So let me just pose a couple questions, and thank you, Hermann, for joining us. So let me pose a couple questions. Some thoughts that I had, Rob, Geoffrey, in particular, to your comments about allies and relationships. What I have found to me is interesting, and Rob, this goes specifically most recently to you, but Geoffrey as well. When Geoffrey was here in Washington, we had a little roundtable, which interestingly enough, people that were in the room are still talking about, and in fact, we're still discussing about ways to move our discussion forward. But there's a renewed interest, or maybe not renewed, but maybe a new interest in the political society here of a transatlantic collaboration or discussion. You know, the idea that the Women's Republican Club of New York, which is in New York City, which has a relatively large membership considering it's in New York City, asked our very own Rob Roos, who sits in European Parliament, to come and speak. How often does a local Republican organization, a large one with a history? I'm not diminishing their role or capacity, but how often do members of European Parliament come and really engage, and the quote unquote common man is really interested in hearing what Europeans are? I can tell you, for the past 10 years, people, and maybe longer, as long as I've been in this little arena, and people in conservatives in Washington would look and say, well, that's the Europeans. They have that weird perspective on things. And I'm sure that the Europeans would say, that's Washington, and they have that weird perspective on things. But I think that there's there's a renewed interest in getting that conservatism and that thoughtful policy discussion going. So I think that's something that I would love to for you to address, both for anyone to address. Nahro, you made some very, very good points, and I think that it's interesting that if you take a look, in particular, as a result of the Abraham Accords, I'm going to say as a result of the Abraham Accords, I think that it's not just the Abraham Accords that is creating this. We see, as the West gets weirder and weirder, as Washington gets weirder and weirder, the Gulf countries, the Saudis, the UAE, Bahrain, and that moving to Northern Africa, you see Egypt and so on. They're beginning to modernize. They're beginning to expand their thought horizons. Their engagement with Israel is something that we only dreamed about. And I'm not talking about the fact that it's in Israel, but the idea that they're expanding their mindset. One of the things you mentioned Iraq and Iran, and what we see happening in Iran. We talk about the war between Russia and Ukraine, and I've mentioned this before. I personally don't believe that there's any different. That what Iran is doing to Iraq is no different than what Russia is doing to Ukraine. The only difference is that Russia is using bombs and missiles, and people see buildings exploding and so on, while yes, Iran does send missiles periodically, and we do see bombs periodically. Those are incidental, as opposed to the bureaucratic invasion of Iraq, which is no different. They have seized control. Iran has essentially annexed Baghdad, has seized control. So we see that, and what we're lacking is, I think, a little bit of Western leadership. So these are all some ideas that really that Washington really must address. We talk about the Africa America conference here that's taking place. I mean, that's huge, and we really need to address these things. But can we, really expand that, or is that only coming from Washington? Do we really need all of these issues addressed specifically from Washington, or can they be? Or is this something that we can work in collaboration, and maybe our allies? Let's go with Europe, since this is Nahro. This is a heavily dominated, European dominated group here. Can the US, quite frankly, or can Europe empower Washington to address many of these issues? With that, I'm going to stop, and whoever speaks first gets to answer first. Rob, you raised your hand.
Yes, thank you. Yes, Geoffrey made very good points. It is the lack of leadership in the world. We are used to do that, and what we now see is a kind of Western self-hate. It is part of this woke movement. In the past, we had this. Well, the woke movement is going further and further, and they start now to indoctrinate our children, and it's I think it's a very dangerous development, and I think it's now recognized all over, as well as in the United States, as also in Europe. So working together is the only solution. The left is very good at it. We see that all over the place. The socialists in Europe, it was Hermann said, hey, he is worried about South America. The socialist countries or the communist countries in South America are supported with money from democratic countries from the West. How is it possible? But it's just to support this socialist system all over the world. I was speaking yesterday with someone from Albania, exactly the same. Albania is not a member of the European Union. They want to become a part. It's a socialist regime they are chosen, but it's corrupt. It's deeply corrupt, and it's supported with money from the European Union. They are developing this socialist system all over the world. We as conservatives, we are not used to work together. We embrace freedom. And that's why we are more busy with ourselves, because we are closer to ourselves, fighting for our own freedom instead that we are cooperating. And now, what we see now is that we have to cooperate. I think maybe that's why I also was asked to speak in New York. It's the only way to survive, because it's going really fast now. In New York, I said it's 2 minutes before 12. I think it is. And we see a development now in Europe with, we have Hungary and also Poland as very strong conservative governments. Sweden has become a conservative government. Czech Republic has become a conservative government, and very recently also Italy has become a conservative government. So what we see is a movement here in Europe that we have more and more conservative governments instead of socialist governments, and that is a very strong movement, because the thing is that almost all the media here in Europe is in the hands of the left. We also see that the media, they are in the institutions, and now we are able to win elections. So the people don't want it anymore. That's the only way it's the only way I can conclude that we are moving in that direction, because people have problems with their living. They will not make it till the end of the month. The energy prices are skyrocketing, inflation, and that's all because of the ideology of the left-wing politicians. So we see that in Europe, we see that in the United States. Cooperation is the only solution, and we need to be strong on a technological basis. We need to be superior on technology and on economically and also military, and but especially the first two, the economic and technological, we can only do that if we work together. If we start to compete with each other, then the only one who is laughing is China. And I also agree with Geoffrey that we should have allies all over the world. And I think it's developing now. We had last week we had visitors from South America, Albania. We are coming together and ask each other for help, and I think that's important. But yeah, that's my conclusion so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Geoffrey?
Yeah, just a couple of quick points. First of all, picking up on the earlier conversation with Rob about speaking in America and how often this sort of thing happens. I think one of the problems is that the Americans have a rosier view of the European Union than many of us in Europe do, particularly amongst the conservatives. That's part of the problem. I think the United States, right across the sort of political spectrum, really, has a view of the European Union, which is quite far from reality. And many conservatives generally are very supportive of sovereign nation states, which goes exactly against the whole flow and direction of movement of the European Union. So, we've got a lot of, and this is why Britain, of course, one of the reasons why we left the European Union. So we don't quite see the EU in the way that perhaps others do. So you've got to be very careful about the European Union. All the time that it was an economic bloc, a common market, I think this was fine. As soon as it developed and sharpened its political ambitions, you get into difficult territory. And as I often warn the United States, don't assume that some sort of integrated Europe under essentially Paris and Berlin would necessarily be an automatic partner of the United States. I think what they would prefer to do is carve out some sort of third way, which would not be terribly helpful. Yeah, on the woke business, I mean, we all talk about this. I mean, it's a new Marxism in a way. It's just wrapped itself up in different clothing. And I suppose the only optimistic thing about this is if we go back to the sort of 60s and 70s, when there was a lot of Marxist teaching in our universities and all the rest of it, this somehow or other didn't deeply infect most of our people. Of course, there were some that were affected, but we got over this in spite of all the fact that the teaching profession generally is left-wing and all the rest of it. Somehow or other, people grew up to see through all this. Whether it's going to happen with woke or whether it will be too late, I don't know, but we've got to do something about woke, and we've got to get on the front foot, and we've got to be more active in combating it and standing up for what's right in our societies. So, yeah, that's my sort of thoughts there.
Excellent. Thank you. Nahro?
Yes, thanks, Rob, for what you said, and well done for speaking at this place in New York. Just a question for the Europeans, especially you guys who are in the parliament and in politics in Europe. There is so much talk about Italy and Hungary now, and the type of politics that Viktor Orban is practicing and Giorgia Meloni in Italy are practicing. I don't know whether you can tell me, I'm a bit ignorant when it comes to that, but do we have to associate ourselves with this type of conservatism, or we have to support them just because they are not socialist?
Hermann?
Can I make a very quick point on that?
Sure, and then Hermann.
The common feature of all these parties and now often governments, which do not have favor amongst the EU sort of elite, is tough immigration policies. It all comes down to the immigration policies and our ability to control our own borders. And I think this is the underlying factor, and the fact that then they challenge EU decisions and it puts them in the naughty boys corner. So, there are a lot of issues here now, but I think that's a key one.
Herman?
Yes, yeah. I agree. I agree with Geoffrey. Immigration is a key issue. The other one. It's the family education is a key issue as well. The nation, the sovereignty is an issue, and they are fighting very hard. Then you have differences. There are differences between Giorgia Meloni and Viktor Orban. And Viktor Orban takes some decisions which are very difficult to explain sometimes. There are some questions which are you have to understand to see how Orban is reacting to this continuous bullying from the side of Brussels, from the European Commission, which is really absolutely incredible, appalling, and violent, almost as they are violating the treaties systematically when they are cutting funds from Hungary and so on, because of things like education, for example. For instance, education where the Commission has absolutely no kind of competence by the treaties, from the treaties and so on. And they create this kind of ideology where they create rights. They create this LGTB right, and they start to say, I mean, the country which has no LGTB education in the primary school is almost fascist, no? It's amazing. We are now, I must say, and we have an alarming development in Spain in these days. Today in Parliament, we have an assault of the socialist and communist government, assault on the constitutional court, and nobody speaks in Europe about it. I mean, they are seeing it. We are following 3 years of complete systematic violations of the rules, of the democratic rules, but also of the law in Spain. They have abolished crimes so that they could free their partners from these people who were condemned by the law because of the independence, the coup in 2017. In Catalonia, they have freed all the criminals of ETA are being put on the street as well, without the regular way of doing things, and now they are putting their own people who were ministers into instead of the judges of the constitutional court and of the body which controls the justice. That is, we are now we have a government which is far nearer to Chavez and to the way Chavez behaved and Maduro than to a social democratic a way of dealing with things that we had in Europe in the 80s, 90s, or in the year 2000s. It's what is happening in Spain is incredible now. I mean, we are all threatened. They are threatening the judges, but they are threatening the opposition, which doesn't want to dance with them on their own, as I say, irregular, systematically irregular ways of dealing with legality, and it's becoming dangerous in Spain. As I say, there's no one word from the Commission. There's no complaint from the nobody is advocating here the Article 7 as they do every week with Hungary and every week with Poland. Well, now with Poland, they have forgotten. They forget a little bit Poland in the last times because they have grown in intensity with Hungary. But it's a kind of transitory way. They are going on all conservative governments which want to respond positively to the ideological proposal they have done to their voters, and that's why they are now in power. And Brussels is increasingly having a kind of ideological commissariat in Brussels, which makes rules, and the whole bureaucracy takes decisions on a basis which is not legal itself. And they are, as I say, it's an ideological bullying continues. In this sense, we are in a very strange situation, because they are allowing things like the Spanish thing to happen. I mean, and the whole they are forgiving, pardoning corruption of the most scandalous and obscene corruption, because it's socialists. They have been prosecuting people of the People's Party because of corruption, and the same cases of the socialists are being pardoned, openly pardoned, and the people don't go to jail in no case. So in this sense, we are in very, very strange situation, and Europe does nothing. I think the weakness of this German French axis that has been ruling the European Union in the last 30 years is finished. I think that's one of the positive effects of the Ukrainian war, that the nations in Northern and Eastern Europe are not going to rely in any case on France and on Germany anymore in the way they did. The glass is broken of these two ideal kind of partners who were more or less governing for the wealth and for the good of everybody. That's finished. I mean, everybody saw that the Germans were ruling things only in their interest, and the French and Macron in a scandalous way as well. So in this sense, I think this changes the way of seeing the European Union, and I think the European Union is going into great changes, which are not exactly the plans that they have with their conference on the future of Europe and with the Green Pact, which is it's a socialist way of social engineering in a monstrous way, which goes interfering in all aspects of life. All aspects of human life are being affected by this Green Pact of the European Union. It's a monstrous history. It's like a quinquennial plan of Lenin, but for the next 100 years. so it's really a dangerous evolution. But I think they will fail. That's the good impression of this nation. There is a reinforcement of the national idea through the Ukrainian resistance.
Thank you, Hermann. I thank everybody for joining us. Geoffrey Van Orden, Rob Roos, Hermann Tertsch, Nahro, Zagros. We had a variety of different countries, different perspectives. I think this is a very important discussion. But I do want to leave on a more optimistic note. And here's my take, my perspective on these most recent elections here in the United States. I was the way I always looked at things with the elections, and of course, anyone who tells you that they know what's going to happen in an election is lying. And any policy person who tells you that they understand politics is probably lying as well. But here was my perspective. I knew I was willing to put money down, and that Republicans were going to win the House of Representatives, and that was going to shift. I was optimistic that the Republicans would take control of the Senate, but I wouldn't put any money down that the Republicans were going to do such a thing. That said, the idea that there was a red wave, we can always speculate as to who started that rumor that there was going to be a red wave, whether it was Republicans that thought that it was actually going to happen, or Democrats that wanted to make you think that Republicans thought it was going to happen, so therefore the Republicans would always lose, whether they won the Senate or not. But the point that I'm optimistic, because if you take a look at individual races, for example, the Democrat majority leader, Senator Schumer, in his race, for example, he won. There's no question about it, but with significantly fewer votes in New York than he ever had before. And race after race after race where the Democrat won, the trajectory of the voter is moving away from the party. So generally speaking, this isn't but generally speaking, the trajectory is moving away from the party. So that's something that tells you where the people are. Why did they not vote for the Republican? For example, in Georgia, where the Republican governor received 200,000 more votes than the Republican candidate for the Senate. That's debatable, and many people, you can go online and watch many videos of that. But I think that I'm optimistic about the future of the country and the direction that people are taking. Lower elected offices on the state level, the city level, the county levels. Also, many Republicans won those, but that's not in the news when we look at the national elections. So that's also very, very encouraging, very, very important. We touched on a variety of different issues relating to Ukraine and energy and so on, and these are all points that really need to be addressed in the coming year and years. And I think that as we discussed earlier on, anecdotally, the relationship and the interest, the dialogue between and transatlantic is growing. The issues relating to the Middle East are growing, but also I believe that the opportunity to address them is growing as well. So I think that these are important points to make. At the Gold Institute over the next year, we're all going to be coming together to focus on these issues and how to address them. What's important, and what I don't want anyone to take away from here, from this discussion today, is that the rise of the woke ideology makes it so it's impossible to address these issues. It's possible, but we just have to work a little bit harder to address them. We have to be able to know how to navigate this new environment to make sure that those are addressed. We talked about the number of European countries that are becoming more conservative. We're talking about the good conservative that are becoming more conservative, and we can and it's possible to change, and we should not walk away dejected. Within the Gold Institute in particular, what makes it so the dynamic within the institute it makes us uniquely suited to be able to address these issues, as we have 8 currently, and we're working on the 9th, but currently we have 8 countries represented within the Gold Institute. Of course, we have the United States, we have the United Kingdom, we have Spain, we have the Netherlands, we have Japan, we have Kurdistan region of Iraq, which Nahro spends a lot of time focused on the issues relating to Iran because they directly impact Iraq as well. We have Israel, we have Egypt as well. So these are the countries I'll fill everybody in, and we're adding representation from Italy as well. So I think that because of that, we're uniquely suited. So over the next couple months, over the next several months, over the next year, we should all look forward to policy ideas, conferences, and discussions on how to solve many of these issues. For that, I thank everybody for joining us today.